The wind cut across the barren cliffs like invisible knives. Kalira pressed herself against the jagged rock, letting the faint warmth of the rising sun touch her marred skin. Her scars, deep and intricate, twisted across her arms and face, telling stories that only she could fully understand. They were a history of pain, rejection, and survival, but in the eyes of her people they were a curse. Every day, Kalira moved through the bustling streets of her city with the careful precision of someone who expected nothing but scorn. The alien crowd moved in perfect synchrony, their smooth skin glowing under the sun, their markings pristine. Unlike her, they were celebrated for their beauty and conformity, and unlike them, Kalira was alone. Even as a child, she had felt the sharp sting of rejection. Parents turned away, peers whispered cruelly, elders shunned her as if her scars carried disease. Her first attempt at friendship ended in laughter and tears. She had learned quickly that the world did not accommodate those who were different, especially those who bore visible reminders of struggle. And so she learned to hide, not just her scars, but her heart. Today, however, something felt different. It was the day of the Festival of Harmony, a celebration of perfection where only the flawless were allowed to participate. Kalira had no invitation, no standing in the crowd, and no desire to seek acceptance. Yet curiosity and a strange ache to see the world outside her hiding place drew her to the edge of the city. The streets were filled with color and light, banners swaying in the soft breeze, and music that vibrated deep into the bones. Everywhere she looked, she saw smiles and laughter, echoes of a life she could never have. The celebration only reminded her of her isolation. Children with smooth, unblemished faces laughed together, forming small circles of belonging that she would never enter. Vendors called out their wares, merchants displayed delicate technologies, and the air smelled of rich spices and fresh minerals. It was intoxicating and alien to her at the same time. Kalira moved along the shadows, watching from the sidelines. Her jaw tightened as whispers and sidelong glances followed her. Even strangers could not look past the scars. Their pity was worse than open hostility. It reminded her that she was not like them, and she never would be. As she reached a quieter part of the city, near the cliffs that bordered the outer walls, she felt a presence behind her. Turning sharply, she found herself looking into eyes that were entirely human, warm brown, unafraid, and strangely curious. He was a human, obviously, and unlike anyone she had ever seen. His skin was soft and unmarked, his hair tousled as though he had just emerged from a storm, and his clothes were simple but functional. He carried nothing that screamed authority or dominance. For a moment, Kalira froze. Humans were rare in her world, and they were usually transient. Most left as quickly as they arrived, never seeking connection. Yet this one did not move away. Instead, he smiled, a gentle, unassuming expression that made her uneasy. "Hello," he said, his voice steady and soft. "I'm Jaren. I'm visiting your city for research. May I ask you a question?" Most had only ever used words like cursed, ugly, or defective. She wanted to scoff, to walk away, but something in his tone held her in place. "Curiosity isn't enough," she said finally, her voice low. "Most humans leave as quickly as they arrive." Years of mistrust warred with a strange flicker of hope. She wanted to vanish into the shadows to avoid disappointment. Yet something about the human's presence, calm and patient, was different. It did not demand, it did not judge, it simply existed. Finally, she nodded once sharply and began walking toward the cliffs, keeping her distance from him. He followed, keeping pace, silent but attentive. The walk was slow, and the air was filled with tension and unspoken words. Kalira's mind raced. Why did she allow this human to follow her? What did he want from her? She had spent years learning that trust was dangerous, that openness invited betrayal. Yet she could not deny the strange comfort in his quiet companionship. When they reached the edge of the cliffs, the wind blew stronger, carrying the scent of minerals and distant water. Kalira glanced over the precipice at the jagged rocks below, a dangerous but breathtaking view. She expected the human to comment, to fumble with his words, but he only stood beside her, eyes scanning the horizon. "You're brave," he said finally, almost to himself. "Not many would come this far alone. And sometimes it's the bravest thing of all. And maybe that's a good thing," he said, smiling again. "Sometimes it takes someone who is different to see what others cannot." The wind whipped around them, and Kalira tightened her cloak against the chill. "Why me?" she asked finally, almost whispering. "Why care about someone like me? Not a friend, not a stranger, not even family." For a brief, shocking moment, she felt seen in a way that went beyond physical appearance. "She began, then stopped. Words failed her, as they often did when emotion threatened to break through the walls she had built. Instead, she turned to the horizon, letting silence carry the weight of her disbelief and the fragile ember of trust she felt toward him. Jaren remained quiet, understanding the power of her silence. He did not force conversation, did not make demands. He merely stood beside her, sharing the moment without overshadowing it. Minutes passed, perhaps an hour. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the cliffside. Kalira finally spoke, her voice lower, almost cautious. "You do not know me," she said. "You do not understand what it is like to be rejected by everyone." Kalira felt something fragile but real. Curiosity, trust, maybe even the beginning of something deeper. For the first time in years, Kalira allowed herself to imagine that the world could be different. That someone could see her as more than her scars. That she could be valued not for conformity, but for strength, courage, and her unique experiences. The wind picked up again, tugging at their clothing and hair, but neither moved away from the edge. Kalira realized that in this human, she had found not only a curious mind, but a kindred spirit. Someone who did not flinch at her scars, who did not judge her for her solitude, who dared to reach toward her when everyone else had turned away. And though she did not fully understand it yet, a tiny spark ignited inside her, a spark of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she could allow herself to care for someone again, to trust, to connect. She glanced at Jaren, seeing his gentle patience, the unwavering interest in her presence. She realized something astonishing. She did not need to hide from him. She did not need to guard every word, every glance, every reaction. For the first time, someone approached her not as a scar, not as an outcast, but as a being of value, capable of thought, courage, and emotion. Kalira did not know what the future held, and she did not know if this human would remain in her life for long. But at this moment, standing on the cliffside with the wind tearing around them, she felt a connection she had never experienced before. A human with simple words and steady presence had touched something deep within her. She breathed in the sharp air, feeling the cold bite against her skin, and let herself imagine a life where she was not alone, where rejection did not define her, where someone could see her scars not as a curse, but as a testament to survival and strength. And for the first time in her life, Kalira felt the faint, thrilling pulse of something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Kalira did not expect him to follow her. She had expected humans to wander through her city, marvel briefly, and then leave. But Jaren remained. He stayed near her, observing quietly, asking occasional questions, and never once making her feel like a spectacle. At first, she had resisted. She did not need company, did not need someone to look at her scars, and certainly did not need someone to see beyond them. Yet curiosity is a stubborn thing. Kalira found herself walking to the outskirts of the city again the next day, and Jaren followed without hesitation. She did not speak much at first, letting her silence be her shield. The cliffs and sparse rock formations outside the city were her refuge, a place where the judgment of others could not reach her. "You've been here before," Jaren said quietly as they walked along a narrow path between jagged stones. "I've noticed the way you move, how you keep to yourself. You know this place well." "You don't have to be alone here," Jaren replied, his voice gentle, careful. "I can stay if you want." Yet she did not. There was something in the way he spoke that did not demand or expect anything from her. He did not want to change her. He did not pity her. He simply existed beside her. For hours they walked, sometimes in silence, sometimes in quiet conversation. Jaren asked questions about the cliffs, the wind patterns, the strange mineral formations that dotted the rocky landscape. Kalira answered, her voice cautious but steady. She found herself explaining things she had never told anyone else. The way the cliffs shifted after storms, the way certain stones hummed faintly when the sun hit them at just the right angle, the hidden pools of water that were safer than they looked. "You notice everything," Jaren said after a while, kneeling beside a small pool of shimmering water. "You notice things others wouldn't even see. That's remarkable." For a brief moment, she let herself imagine that perhaps she could be more than the scars and the rejection. "Most people would call it useless," she said softly, dipping a hand into the cool water. "They would laugh at me for noticing these things. They think survival is simple, that it doesn't take thought. But they are wrong." Yet this human, this Jaren, saw strength where others saw flaws. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the rocks. Kalira found herself talking more, telling him about her past, carefully selecting what to share. She spoke of her early years, of the whispered insults of the isolation. She spoke of survival, of learning to move through a world that rejected her at every turn. Jaren listened without interruption, without judgment, without pity. When she stopped, he asked questions, not to challenge her but to understand. He asked about the scars, how they had formed, what each one meant. He did not flinch or turn away when she lifted her arms to show him. Instead, he studied them carefully, as if each line told a story of courage and endurance. "They're beautiful," he said finally. Kalira almost laughed at him. "Beautiful?" People used cruel words, not compliments. "You've never met anyone like me?" she said, a mixture of disbelief and amusement in her tone. "Maybe not," he admitted. "But I'm glad I have now." Kalira led him through hidden paths, showing him places no other alien dared visit. She taught him to read the subtle changes in the wind, to sense vibrations through the stone, to understand the quiet language of the cliffs. Jaren followed attentively, learning quickly, asking questions that were thoughtful and respectful. One day, as they sat by a narrow ledge overlooking the valley below, a sudden noise startled them. A pack of predatory creatures, rare but dangerous, emerged from a crevice, their claws scraping the rocks. Kalira's body tensed instantly. Survival instincts honed over years took over. She positioned herself between Jaren and the creatures, calculating the safest route to escape. "Move slowly," she whispered. "They sense fear, not intention. If you panic, they will attack." Breathing heavily, Kalira turned to him. "You stayed calm," she said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Most would have panicked, screamed, or run." And yet here was someone offering trust without condition, without expectation, without fear. They spent the night in a small cave tucked into the cliffside, safe from the creatures below. The stars stretched endlessly above, and the wind whispered through the rocks. Kalira found herself speaking freely, telling Jaren about things she had never admitted to anyone, her fears, her small victories, her fleeting dreams. "You're different from others," she said softly. "You don't judge, you don't pity, you see me." She had not expected words like that. No one had ever spoken so openly, so honestly about her. She wanted to push him away, to tell him he didn't understand, that it was impossible to like someone like her. But the warmth in her chest was stubborn. It refused to be silenced. The next few days were filled with small adventures. They explored hidden valleys, climbed jagged cliffs, and studied the strange flora and fauna that thrived in isolation. Jaren's enthusiasm was infectious, and Kalira found herself laughing, truly laughing for the first time in years. He never mocked her, never commented on her scars with pity, and never tried to change her. He simply appreciated her for who she was. One evening, as they watched the twin moons rise over the horizon, Kalira realized something astonishing. She was beginning to care for him, not just as a companion, but as someone who mattered to her in a way that no one ever had. Her heart, long closed and hardened, was opening, slowly, cautiously, like a flower reaching for the sun. Jaren, sensing the shift, did not push. He sat quietly beside her, his presence gentle and steady, allowing her to navigate her own feelings. It was a new kind of connection for Kalira, one built on respect, trust, and genuine interest. She did not have to hide or fight for her worth. He saw it already. And yet, a small voice inside her warned her to be careful. Humans left, aliens rejected, and the world was rarely kind to those who were different. Could she allow herself to hope? Could she trust someone again after so many years of solitude and pain? The next day, as they walked along a narrow ridge, Kalira stumbled slightly on loose rock. Jaren caught her instinctively, his hand steadying her without hesitation. Their eyes met, and she saw something there that startled her, admiration not for her appearance but for her courage and resilience. "You are remarkable," he said again softly, as if repeating a truth he could not help but acknowledge. Kalira felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of fear and hope. Remarkable, acceptance, trust. Words she had long believed were meaningless now held weight. She realized with a start that she did not want this human to leave. She wanted him to stay. For the first time in years, Kalira allowed herself to imagine a different life. One where she was not alone, where someone could see her as she truly was, where scars were not a curse but a testament to survival and strength. She did not fully understand the emotions rising within her, but she knew they were powerful and real. That night, as the twin moons reflected in the pools of water around them, Kalira stared at the sky, feeling a strange peace. She had found someone who did not fear her, who did not judge her, who had seen her strength and survived it with kindness. She did not know what the future held, but for the first time she dared to hope. Jaren sat beside her, quiet and patient, letting her thoughts settle. She did not need to speak. Words were unnecessary. His presence alone was enough to make her feel seen, valued, and understood. Kalira closed her eyes, letting the wind carry away her doubts, letting the warmth of human trust fill the cracks in her heart. The world had rejected her, society had shunned her, and solitude had been her companion for too long. But here with Jaren, she felt a spark of something extraordinary, a connection she had almost forgotten existed. And for the first time in her life, Kalira allowed herself to believe that perhaps one human could change everything. Kalira had always thought the city would never notice her, that she could remain invisible on the fringes of society. But the presence of a human changed that. Word spread quickly. Humans were rare visitors, and a human spending time with Kalira, the outcast, was extraordinary. Whispers followed them through the streets, glances sharpened into stares, and not all of them were friendly. By the third day, Kalira noticed the shift. The smooth-skinned citizens who had always ignored or mocked her now looked at her with suspicion, curiosity, and even thinly veiled anger. They muttered to each other as she passed, their voices dripping with judgment. Kalira clenched her fists but said nothing. She had grown accustomed to rejection, but this felt different. It was not just indifference, it was challenge. Jaren walked beside her, unaware at first of the stares, until Kalira finally spoke. "They do not like you," she said flatly, her voice calm but edged with tension. He turned to look at her, his expression gentle. "I notice. But why would it matter what they think? You are not responsible for their judgment. I am alone, rejected and feared. Strength does not erase that." That afternoon, they decided to venture closer to the city center, where the Festival of Harmony continued. It was a place Kalira had avoided for years, a place where her scars had always marked her as an outsider. But Jaren wanted to see it. He wanted to understand her world, and he had asked her to show him. "Do not expect kindness," Kalira warned as they approached the gates. "They will mock, judge, and perhaps even try to harm you for associating with me." She kept her head high, refusing to let them see her fear. Jaren, for his part, followed closely, his presence a quiet reassurance. A group of young aliens, their skin gleaming and markings perfect, stepped in front of them, blocking their path. One of them, taller than the rest, sneered. "What is this? A human with a scarred outcast?" "Move," she said, her voice low and steady. The young alien laughed, sharp and cruel. "Or what, you, alone?" "I am not nothing," she said sharply, stepping forward. Her voice, loud and commanding, carried over the whispers of the crowd. "I survive, I endure, I think, I understand. That is more than any of you can claim." A few more citizens stepped closer, drawn by curiosity and surprise. Kalira took a deep breath, letting her presence fill the space. She did not shout to intimidate, nor did she plead for acceptance. She simply stood tall, the scars on her arms and face glinting in the sunlight, evidence of survival, resilience, and endurance. The alien leader of the group finally stepped back, muttering under his breath. Kalira had not won them over, but she had made them pause. For the first time, they had seen her not as an outcast, but as a being of strength and intelligence. Jaren stepped forward, gently placing a hand near Kalira's elbow, not touching, only guiding, steadying. "You were brilliant," he said softly. "You made them see you for who you are." They devised small projects, studying local plants that could provide medicine, repairing ancient mechanisms that had been ignored, and mapping safe paths through the cliffs and valleys around the city. Each success drew attention. Some aliens were intrigued, some suspicious, and some openly hostile. But Kalira did not falter. She had Jaren beside her, and his belief in her abilities gave her strength she had never known. One afternoon, they were called to the city council, a group of elders who oversaw social order. The council rarely noticed outcasts, and Kalira expected them to dismiss her as unworthy. But Jaren insisted she attend, arguing that her work deserved recognition. Inside the council chamber, Kalira stood before the elders, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. Jaren stood quietly beside her, offering silent support. The elders murmured among themselves, some curious, some skeptical, all observing the unusual pairing of human and alien. Kalira presented their work with clarity and confidence. She explained the value of her discoveries, the methods she had used, and the risks she had navigated alone before Jaren arrived. She did not beg for approval or validation. She simply demonstrated her competence and intelligence. Some elders nodded slowly, surprised by her insight. Others scowled, unwilling to admit that an outcast could accomplish so much. But Jaren's presence reinforced her words, a reminder that someone valued her for her skills, not her appearance. After the presentation, one of the council members, a stern female with pale markings, spoke. Your work is impressive, but can we trust that it was not the human who guided you? I understand. The human has only seen what I already am. Not just your work, but you. She had faced rejection her entire life, but with Jaren, she felt capable of challenging the world itself. She began to understand a new kind of strength, one born not from isolation, but from partnership, trust, and respect. Over the following days, they faced more challenges. Citizens whispered, young aliens tried to test her patience, and occasionally she encountered hostility that reminded her why she had hidden for so long. Yet, Jaren remained beside her, patient and calm, his belief in her never wavering. One evening, as they returned from another expedition, Kalira paused on a narrow bridge overlooking a deep chasm. The wind was fierce, tugging at her cloak, but she stood tall. Jaren followed her gaze, understanding her silent tension. "They are testing you," he said softly. "Not just your work, but your character, and you are proving yourself every day. Their judgment has little power over me now. It is my own trust that I must earn." She was no longer the lonely outcast she had been just weeks ago. She had a companion who saw her value, who believed in her, and who offered unwavering support without demand or expectation. That night, as the twin moons rose over the city, Kalira lay on a ledge outside her home, staring at the stars. She thought about the challenges ahead, about the society that had long rejected her, and about the human who had changed everything. Perhaps, she realized, the world could be different. Perhaps someone could see beyond scars, beyond rejection, beyond fear. Perhaps with patience and courage, she could carve a place for herself, not just as a survivor, but as someone respected, valued, and even admired. And for the first time in her life, Kalira felt the spark of something extraordinary, the belief that connection, trust, and courage could change not only her own life, but the world around her. She turned to Jaren, who sat quietly beside her, and felt a sense of gratitude she could not fully name. He had not demanded, judged, or controlled her. He had simply seen her. And that simple act, she realized, was more powerful than any judgment, any insult, or any rejection she had ever endured. The future was uncertain, and the challenges would not disappear. But for the first time, Kalira felt ready. Ready to face the whispers, the stares, the tests of society. Ready to prove that scars were not weakness, that rejection was not the end, and that strength and courage could shine even in the harshest light. And most importantly, ready to accept that perhaps, just perhaps, she did not have to face the world alone. The sky above the cliffs darkened with storm clouds, unusual for this season. Kalira sensed it first, a shift in the wind, a tension in the air that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. She had always been attuned to the environment, reading subtle signs that most overlooked. Jaren noticed her pause, eyes narrowing, and followed her gaze. "What is it?" he asked, voice calm but alert. "The wind," Kalira said quietly. "It's changing, something is coming." The cliffs and valleys were beautiful but dangerous, and Kalira knew the hazards of underestimating nature. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the canyon. Rocks trembled beneath their feet. Kalira's instincts screamed at her. They were not alone. She scanned the rocky slopes and spotted the glint of sharp claws catching the faint light. A pack of predators, larger and faster than any she had seen before, had been disturbed by the storm. They were hunting, and Kalira and Jaren were in their path. "Move carefully," she whispered, her voice tense. "Do not panic, watch my lead." Her scars itched with tension, her body ready for action. She had survived worse, but this was different. The stakes were immediate, the danger real, and the human beside her had no experience with these predators. The creatures emerged from the shadows, their bodies sleek, eyes glowing with hunger. Kalira did not flinch. She had faced rejection, scorn, and isolation, and these predators were no different. She moved with precision, guiding Jaren to a narrow ridge where the predators could not easily follow. "They'll come this way," she warned. "Stay close to me." Kalira sidestepped, her body agile and strong despite the scars that crisscrossed her arms and legs. She had learned to fight with her entire being, using not just strength but awareness and instinct. The creature missed her, sliding past with a hiss. Jaren froze for a moment, startled, but Kalira reached for his arm, steadying him. "Move," she instructed. "Follow my steps exactly." After what felt like hours but was only minutes, they reached a narrow ledge high above the valley floor. The predators could not follow. Kalira leaned against the stone, breathing heavily, while Jaren recovered from the adrenaline. "You saved us," he said finally, awe in his voice. "I never doubted you for a second." "You survived because you trusted me. That is strength, too." Jaren sat beside her, his presence calm, a steady reassurance amidst chaos. "You were incredible," he said softly. "I have never seen anyone move like that. Your skills, they're beyond anything I could have imagined." To have someone recognize her abilities without judgment felt strange, almost overwhelming. "You only see what I show," she said quietly. "There is more to this world than survival, more danger, more challenge, more pain. Do not assume it is easy." They took turns keeping watch, alert to every sound, every movement. Kalira found herself observing Jaren in return, noticing his calmness, his patience, his careful attention to detail. He did not panic. He did not interfere. He learned. He adapted. In many ways, he was stronger than he appeared, human fragility hidden beneath an unshakable mind. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the cliffs glistening and slick with rain. The valley below looked different in the morning light, vibrant and alive. Kalira's heart lifted slightly. They had survived, and in doing so, she realized something new. Courage was not just her own. It could be shared, multiplied, and strengthened by trust and partnership. "We should return to the city," she said. "But slowly. The terrain is unstable after the storm." When they finally reached the outskirts of the city, word had already spread. Citizens had seen the storm, the falling rocks, and the courage required to survive such a treacherous journey. Rumors swirled about the human and the scarred outcast who had faced nature itself and lived. Some aliens approached with curiosity, others with skepticism, but Kalira did not falter. She had survived the storm, she had faced the predators, and she had done so with someone who saw her not as an outcast, but as a capable being worthy of respect. That evening, as they rested near the city walls, Kalira spoke quietly. "You do not know what this means to me," she said, "to be seen like this. To survive not alone, but with someone who trusts me." And now she felt them reflected in someone else's eyes, offered freely and without condition. Over the next week, Kalira and Jaren used their experiences to teach others. They guided young aliens through survival techniques, demonstrated ways to navigate dangerous terrain, and shared knowledge of the cliffs and valleys that had long been ignored. Slowly, respect began to replace whispers. Even those who had been openly hostile began to acknowledge her abilities. The council, previously skeptical, took notice once more. Kalira presented their findings and experiences, emphasizing the value of knowledge, preparation, and resilience. The elders listened, impressed by her calmness, clarity, and courage. Jaren remained at her side, never overshadowing her, simply supporting her presence and reinforcing her words when needed. "You are changing their minds," he said quietly as they left the chamber. "Not by force, but by example. That is the truest form of strength." It was not just survival, not just the storm, not just the predators. It was the combination of courage, skill, and partnership that made them effective. Together, they could accomplish what she had never imagined possible alone. As they returned to the cliffs that had become their sanctuary, Kalira looked at the landscape with renewed appreciation. The scars on her arms, once symbols of pain and rejection, now felt like badges of experience, proof of her endurance and ability. She had faced the elements, faced danger, and faced society's judgment, and she had survived with dignity. Jaren noticed her contemplative silence. "You've come far," he said softly. "And yet, I think you are only beginning to see what you are capable of." Courage could be shared, trust could be given and received, and even scars once sources of shame could become symbols of strength. That night beneath the twin moons, Kalira lay on the cliffside, staring at the sky. Jaren sat beside her, silent and steady, a constant presence. She reflected on the past days, on the storm, the predators, and the judgment of others. She had faced each challenge with him by her side, and she realized something extraordinary. Courage, when combined with trust, became something greater than herself. For the first time in years, Kalira felt fully alive. The world had tested her, society had challenged her, and the forces of nature had threatened her. But she had endured, grown, and learned. And she had done so with someone who valued her, respected her, and believed in her. She reached out, allowing her fingers to brush his in a quiet, tentative gesture. Jaren responded with gentle warmth, his presence reassuring, patient, and unassuming. No words were necessary. In that simple touch, Kalira felt the strength of connection, the quiet power of trust, and the spark of something she had long denied herself: hope, friendship, and the faint beginnings of love. The future remained uncertain. Challenges awaited, and society's full acceptance was not yet guaranteed. But Kalira knew she was no longer alone. She had Jaren beside her, and together they could face whatever came next. And for the first time in her life, Kalira allowed herself to imagine a future where scars were celebrated, where trust and courage triumphed over fear, and where someone could truly see her. Not just the outcast, not just the scarred survivor, but the remarkable being she had always been. The city was quieter than usual, the air charged with anticipation. Kalira could feel it in the wind, in the way shadows stretched across the streets, and in the whispered conversations of those she passed. Word of her exploits with Jaren had spread far and wide. The council had watched, skeptics slowly yielding to evidence, while ordinary citizens murmured in curiosity, surprise, and sometimes admiration. For Kalira, it was strange to feel noticed. She had spent most of her life invisible, her scars marking her as an outsider. Yet now, the same scars that had once drawn mockery drew respect. And beside her walked Jaren, steady and unshakable, a human who had never judged, who had never flinched, and who had shown her a bond built on trust and admiration. "Are you ready?" Jaren asked quietly, walking beside her through the city gates. Kalira nodded, though her stomach twisted with nerves. Today was different. Today, she would stand not just as a survivor, but as someone the city could not ignore. A trial had been arranged by the council, a demonstration of courage, intelligence, and resilience. If she succeeded, it would mark a turning point, not just for her, but for every outcast who had ever been rejected. The council chamber was larger than she remembered, filled with elders whose expressions ranged from curiosity to skepticism. Kalira's steps echoed on the polished floor as she walked forward, her head held high. Jaren followed silently, his presence a quiet reassurance rather than a shadow. "You have faced challenges before," the eldest council member said, her voice cold but attentive. "But today is not just about survival. It is about showing us who you truly are." This was just another challenge, another opportunity to demonstrate what she had always known, that scars were not weakness, that courage was not measured by conformity, and that strength came in many forms. The council presented her with a complex task, a demonstration of knowledge, agility, and problem-solving. A device had been left inactive for centuries, a relic of the city's ancient history, and only someone with insight, patience, and skill could restore it. Others had tried and failed. Kalira had studied the device during her expeditions with Jaren, noting the subtle signs of wear, the hidden mechanisms, and the intricate balance required to make it work. She approached the device, her hands steady despite the tension in the room. Jaren remained at her side, silent, letting her take the lead. Kalira's fingers traced the edges of the device, noting the patterns, the small dents, and the tiny, almost imperceptible marks that revealed how it had been used long ago. She worked with precision, her movements fluid, her mind focused. The elders watched intently. Some frowned, some leaned forward, and some murmured to each other. Kalira ignored them, tuning out the whispers and focusing entirely on the task before her. She had done this countless times during her explorations, but never under scrutiny like this. Yet the stakes did not intimidate her. Her scars, her experiences, and the years of rejection had prepared her for this moment. Minutes passed. The device remained silent. A tension filled the room, thick and palpable. Kalira's heart raced, but she did not panic. Instead, she adjusted her approach, applying what she had learned, observing the subtle feedback from the mechanisms. Each adjustment, each calculation, each careful movement brought her closer to success. Finally, with a soft click, the device came to life. Lights flickered, gears moved, and a low hum resonated through the chamber. The council members gasped, some in surprise, some in reluctant admiration. Kalira straightened, her posture calm, her eyes meeting theirs without fear. "You have done what many could not," the eldest said, her voice softening. "You have proven not just skill, but insight, patience, and courage." Jaren stepped forward, placing a gentle hand near her back, not to guide, but to support. "You did it," he said quietly. "I knew you could." After the demonstration, the council conferred in hushed tones. Kalira and Jaren waited side by side. When the eldest council member returned, her expression had softened, her gaze no longer cold but thoughtful. "You have changed our perception," she said, "not just of this device, but of what is possible. Your scars, your experiences, and your courage are evidence that strength is not defined by appearance or conformity. You have earned recognition." The whispers that had followed her for so long began to fade, replaced by acknowledgement of her abilities and character. Kalira exhaled, a mixture of relief and disbelief filling her chest. She had faced the judgment of her society, the scrutiny of the council, and the weight of her own fears, and she had emerged triumphant. She had proven that her scars were not a mark of weakness, but a testament to endurance, intelligence, and courage. Jaren's hand brushed hers lightly, a silent affirmation of connection and support. Kalira looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. He had never doubted her, never judged her, and never demanded that she change. His presence had been constant, patient, and respectful, a human who saw her not as an outcast, but as someone remarkable. As they left the council chamber, citizens gathered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to admiration. Some approached cautiously, offering tentative words of respect. Others simply watched, acknowledging her strength without fully understanding it. Kalira walked with her head high, the wind catching her hair and cloak, feeling a sense of freedom she had never known. Later, as they returned to the cliffs where they had first found refuge, Kalira paused to look at the horizon. The city stretched below, a world that had once rejected her now beginning to see her worth. She felt a surge of hope, tempered by the knowledge that acceptance was a process, not an event. Yet for the first time, she believed it was possible. Jaren stood beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. "You've done more than prove yourself," he said softly. "You've shown everyone that courage, intelligence, and trust are stronger than judgment and fear. You've changed their minds, and perhaps the future as well. They study, observe, then move on. Why stay? Perhaps something more. She had always guarded her heart, believing connection brought pain. Yet here was someone who offered it freely without expectation or demand, and she found herself opening to it. "Then stay," she said quietly, almost a whisper. "Stay with me." "I am." She was not just the outcast or the scarred survivor. She was remarkable, valued, and capable of connection. In the days that followed, Kalira's presence in the city shifted. Where once there had been whispers of mockery, there were now murmurs of respect. Children watched her with curiosity rather than fear, elders nodded in acknowledgement, and citizens approached her with tentative admiration. She had not sought this recognition. It had been earned through courage, intelligence, and the quiet power of trust. Jaren remained by her side, patient, respectful, and unwavering. He never overshadowed her, never dictated her actions, and never judged her past. He had offered something rarer than praise or protection, belief in her. And in that belief, Kalira found the courage to embrace the possibility of love, partnership, and hope. One evening, as they watched the twin moons rise over the cliffs, Kalira took Jaren's hand in her own. He responded immediately, a gentle warmth that reassured her. No words were necessary. In that simple connection, they shared trust, respect, and a bond forged through shared challenges and mutual understanding. Kalira looked out over the city, the cliffs, and the vast landscape beyond. She had faced storms, predators, and societal judgment. She had endured rejection, isolation, and fear. Yet now she stood tall, not as a survivor alone, but as someone recognized, respected, and loved. The journey had been long, the challenges immense, and the world often cruel. But in Jaren, she had found a partner who saw her worth, who celebrated her strengths, and who offered unwavering support. Together they had faced danger, judgment, and uncertainty, and together they had triumphed. For Kalira, the scars that had once been a source of shame were now symbols of endurance and strength. The judgment of society, once a weight she carried, was now tempered by acknowledgement and respect. And the bond she shared with Jaren, built on trust, courage, and understanding, was a foundation for a future she had never imagined possible. As the night deepened, Kalira leaned against Jaren, her heart steady, her mind calm. She had survived, she had triumphed, and she had found connection. The world had tested her, but she had proven that courage, trust, and perseverance could overcome even the harshest judgment. And in that moment, Kalira allowed herself to feel something she had long denied: hope. Hope that the scars would no longer define her, that trust could be given and received, and that love could flourish even in the most unlikely of places. With Jaren beside her, she knew that the future, however uncertain, would be filled with strength, courage, and connection. She had faced rejection, endured hardship, and risen above it all. And now she could step forward into a world that finally saw her, not as the scarred outcast, but as the remarkable being she had always been.